Today's passage to read is from the letter to Titus, chapter 3, verses 1 to 7. And the church remembers Margery Kempe, who was a mystic in the late 14th century in Norfolk. She was a contemporary of Julian of Norwich, and she did visit Julian, but Margery was a very different character. She was described as a complex person. She was not a nun, she was a married woman, and she had no fewer than 14 children. Imagine that. As well as that, she had visions of Christ. And she went on pilgrimage to many far-flung places, to Rome, Jerusalem, Santiago. And she lived in a sense of close personal communion with Christ. But she was often in trouble with the church, and more than once imprisoned. She seems to have been an emotional person who didn't hide her feelings or her tears, and perhaps that unsettled the male clergy. She was regarded as a troublemaker by them, and she was outspoken in her criticisms of the church, so perhaps that was fair. She was tried for heresy more than once, but never convicted. There's a rather lovely account of a conversation between her and the Archbishop. On one occasion, he examined her in the faith and couldn't fault her in any detail in her knowledge. Then he said to her, "I hear it said that you are a very wicked woman." Quick as lightning, Margery came back and said, "And I hear it said that you are a very wicked man. If you are as wicked as they say, you will never get to heaven unless you amend while you are here." I can't help thinking, what a nerve. And actually, good for her. The priests tried to shut her up by pointing out that St. Paul forbade women to preach. You can find that in 1 Timothy 2, verse 12. Margery replied that she'd never been into a pulpit, and she only spoke to people within normal conversations. Evidently, she had her wits about her, and the Archbishop must have been impressed, despite himself, because he let her go with a blessing, commended her honesty, and asked her to pray for him. When Margery read today's passage from Titus about obeying rulers and authorities, she evidently was not deterred from criticising the church authorities of her day. She didn't fear to call out wrong when she saw it, and nor should we. The teaching in Titus must be read in context of a church that was trying to live in a hostile world and to avoid giving unnecessary offence. They wanted to show that Christians could be responsible citizens. The same probably motivated Paul's advice in Romans 13 to obey the ruling authorities. There have been plenty of occasions since when Christians have decided to break the law or defy authority in the name of the gospel and to be true to their faith. It's an example of how important it is to interpret any scriptural passage in its original context before we think we know what it means for us today. Margery Kempe is an important figure, and her dictated autobiography, the Book of Margery Kempe, is significant because it gives us the best insight we have into a female middle-class life in the Middle Ages. Her legacy is impressive for a person who never learnt to write, had no formal education, and actually often suffered severe depression as well. It makes me wonder, what will my legacy be? What will people remember of my life? And indeed, what have I been doing with all my time? Perhaps that's a reflection which is quite good for all of us.